Welcome to the Draft Deeper podcast. This is your host, Nathan Grubel. Joining me, as always, is my producer, Kevin Black. I just got back from seeing the G League Ignite team in person in Delaware against the Delaware Bluecoats. And so, naturally, any sort of emptying the notebook segment, whether it be on the Morning Dunk for No Ceilings or it be on this podcast, any segment about the G League has to include Corey Tulaba from the Draft Deck podcast. And of course, it's recording on a Monday, so you already know who's here as well. Tyler Rucker, aka Backcourt Violation, is once again reporting for duty for the Draft Deeper podcast. Corey, I'll start with you. How you doing?
I am terrific, man. It's been a big night. Hopped on the No Ceilings podcast for the first time. I told Metcalf on the podcast, he was the first guest that I ever had for the Draft Deck podcast, and somehow I'm the last possible draft Twitter guest that he could possibly get on a platform that we share. So it's been a fun evening. I finally got to live out my dream of appearing there with Rucker, but I'm excited now to switch it over and hop on Draft Deeper and pull double duty.
It's fine. I mean, it only took Metcalf like a year and a half to actually get on my podcast, so it's fine. But Rucker, how you feeling over there, big guy?
I'm good. Like Corey said, we just did a great pod with Metcalf, and it felt weird realizing I've been on that podcast like 4 times before Corey was on once. So I'm more pumped for this though. No offense, Metcalf, because Draft Deeper, baby. It's been a minute, and I'm pumped to get after it. Talk some G League guys with Corey.
It's fine. He doesn't return the favor for me either. I think I've only been on the No Ceilings pod once, so it's fine. Whatever he wants to have me on, he can reach out, and then I'll reject him for good measure, and then we'll get back on it. So we'll teach him a lesson. we're very mature over at the Draft Deeper. But if you heard our last podcast, our mock draft with Simon Rath and Tyler, where Simon immediately just blurts out "fuck the Kings" at the very beginning of the podcast, then you know that we are very mature and professional Draft Deeper at all times. But
great Bulls pick on that episode.
I forgot who made it. Was that you?
I think that was me that picked for the Bulls. Yeah, no. I'm pretty sure that was me.
Toot your own horn, huh?
Of course. So we are going to try to be a little professional, though. As I said at the top, I recently just saw the G League Ignite team the week before. Corey also saw them in Long Island, so we have some firsthand impressions to go over. We're basically at the end of the G League Ignite season. They played through the Vegas Cup, if you want to call it that, and then they've had some exhibition games after their time in Las Vegas. And obviously results have been up and down, hit and miss for some of the guys on this team, namely Jaden Hardy, who I feel like we have to start with. He's the most divisive prospect amongst these guys. I think for the most part, the other 3 that we're going to talk about have gained a lot of positive buzz over the course of this G League Ignite season, but Hardy has suffered the most in terms of his draft stock. Unless you're Adam Spinella over at the Box and One, or you're one of us, you may have Jaden Hardy outside of the top 20. I've seen Jaden Hardy as low as like the 50s on some public draft Twitter boards, which seems incredibly drastic to me.
Yes, it
but
does.
However, that being said, Corey, I want to start with you first because I did not get to see Jaden Hardy play. He did not play against the Bluecoats, but you saw him throw up an absolute stinker in terms of shooting. I believe he was 0 for 11 from the field. But we do know sometimes it's not always fair to fully judge a prospect's performance off of the box score numbers. But that being said, how did you feel about seeing Jaden Hardy in person? What were some of the takeaways you had?
Well, first, Nate, before I get started, I just want to correct you that I saw Jaden Hardy on Long Island, not in. For anybody that may be listening that is from Long Island, they probably are furious at you. So I just want to correct that so that they can go on listening to the rest of this episode in enjoyment rather than anger. My impression of Hardy coming off of that game and having him follow that up with a 31-point heater is exactly why I wrote about Jaden Hardy for No Ceilings, comparing how he makes me feel to the brilliant episode of Saved by the Bell, Jessie's song, where she gets addicted to caffeine pills and sings out, "I'm so excited, I'm so excited, I'm so scared." Because it's the games like I saw against the Nets where he can't throw anything in the ocean. It wasn't even really knocking a ton of shots down in warm-ups.
Mhm.
Cannot make the right read for the life of him. I mean, just turnovers and forcing the action and just looks completely overmatched. And then you watch him a couple of days later and he looks exactly like the guy who I had number 1 on my board in the preseason, where you're like, oh my God, this dude is an unbelievable shot maker. He's got the prettiest jumper in the draft. It looks like it'll never touch the rim. And he's this dynamic downhill scoring threat on top of all the shooting. So, I mean, if anything, all he's done this week is confuse me even more. And, seeing him in person, I definitely wasn't impressed. It's hard to be when you see somebody go 0 for 11 and struggle like that. But you can't argue the kid's got talent and he's got lottery talent. It's just like my entire outlook on him is like, what situation does he go to and what culture is he going to walk into, and can they cultivate the type of player that he could potentially be? Because the kid has all of the tools.
You know that when we do in-person evaluations, it's not just to watch the game itself, but it's also to get a look at these guys, get a feel for how they look physically, get a feel for them in warm-up, see what their shot looks like. When you got to look at Hardy outside of the game, just physically, Corey, does he look like he's ready to handle the NBA two guard position?
I mean, I think he's got a phenomenal build. He's got big, broad shoulders. He's cut up. He's lean, but in a good way. He's got like, one of the reasons I compared him like in the preseason to a Jason Tatum Dame hybrid was because I thought he had like the same frame as Tatum. He was just shorter. So I was impressed with what he looked like physically, but I do think that he is probably, in that Bradley Beal height range where he's more of like a 6'3" undersized two guard than he is kind of, you were hoping that he'd be 6'5", 6'6", like the prototypical shooting guard size. So I was, I mean, and not that will stop him. There's a lot of dynamic guards in
Right.
that height range. It's not like we're talking Kennedy Chandler here. You know, so, but I do think he looked a little shorter than I expected, but physically he looked awesome. He's in killer shape and he's got a great NBA frame to grow into.
So obviously, Rucker, we come back to a lot of the shot making, or sometimes lack thereof. What you've been able to see on film when you've watched some of Jaden Hardy, do you think we'd be having a much different conversation if his shooting percentages were better? Or do you think there's more things wrong with his game that have kind of knocked him down boards?
I think everyone's a little nervous about the decision making because he's still turning the ball over a bunch, like Corey said. You still see plenty of games where he's turning the ball over 4 to 5 times at least, and it's consecutive games doing that. But I also think he's been making some strides with his reads throughout the year. And you're starting to see the percentages come alive. You're starting to see that, hilarious enough, like Corey saw the one game he goes 0 for 11. And, since January 7th, including that game, he's shooting around 43% from the field, which is impressive when you throw in an 0 for 11 game. So, I mean, it's like you definitely can see the shot coming alive. You can see the confidence is building. It's just happening slower than we all want it to. But um, I just think the decision making, if he can limit the turnovers, he has the tools. Like Corey said, like I haven't been able to see him in person, but I trust what you and Corey say. Like seeing that he's got the frame at such a young age, just the progressions he's had throughout the year. I know they've got a couple of days before their next game. I think they play the 12th is their next game coming up for the Ignite.
Yeah.
So we'll see if he can build off this stretch and keep heating up and put together a solid stretch of, efficient performances. I definitely still think that this is a guy that can heat up and start moving up again. But this evaluation's turning into, you check yourself into a mental hospital after doing this for too long because I was a guy like Corey, like I had him top 5 beginning of the year. Then I've
Yeah,
moved
we
him
all did.
down and, now I want to move him back up. So you're just going to have to go with your gut with this guy and look at the whole slate. You're going to have to say, okay, from the beginning to the end of the year, like, did he get better? Did he take notable leaps forward? And I think he's on that path to doing that.
Corey, I don't think we would call him a great defender in the backcourt by any means. But was there anything in particular that stood out to you on that end of the floor? Because that's probably the one area, the one part to his evaluation where I don't have the best feel for him. I don't know if you had any other insight in terms of anything that might have stood out to you seeing him in person.
I mean, I think he's got tools to defend. I think he plays hard on that end at times, but he does have bad habits that date back to his time in high school. Like he did his classic, like, let me just let the guy blow by me and try to poke it away from behind. And, that's something that you can get away with at lower levels, but you can't get away with in the pros, because if he goes to an NBA team with a coach that is actually going to make him earn his development, he's going to do that. Just let a guy blow by. He's not going to poke it away, and he's going to put his team in a position where they give up a bucket at a disadvantage, and his coach is going to pull him. So like, it's stuff like that I wish I saw less of. I don't think that he's a guy that's going to give low effort throughout the game, and he certainly has stuff to work on off ball. But I do think that the fact that he's learning NBA defensive principles is helpful, because while the college guys on the weak side can sink all the way down to the rim and just stay there without getting called for anything, like, he's learning what positions he's going to actually be on an NBA floor. So I think that stuff's valuable, but I don't think if you're drafting Jaden Hardy, you're looking for him to be a high level defender. Obviously, that would be a great scenario if that played out, but you look at most of the players like him that you hope he turns into, and none of them are going to be this defensive foundational piece at the point of attack. You just kind of hope that he's in the right spots and can contest enough. And I think he's going to struggle on that end for a while in the NBA, because he just has a lot to learn, and what he doesn't know. But down the line, when he's ready to be a big time player, if he gets to that level, I think he'll be sufficient enough on that end.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think he's ever going to be like a positive defensively necessarily. I mean, he averages over a steal per game, so obviously there are certain situations where he's been able to play a passing lane, force a turnover, but I don't think he's ever going to be a positive in the way that some other two guards or wings, but however you want to classify them in this class, can definitely affect games on the perimeter defensively. But I think as long as he doesn't sink your team down in such a way defensively, and I think as long as he's showing the effort and the competitiveness possession to possession, and you never see that effort waver from him, I think that's probably about as good as it's going to get for Hardy. Because obviously we're a lot more focused on what he's doing offensively, and that comes back to the shot making. Is he a combo guard who can initiate offense? Is he the type of guard who you want bringing the ball up the floor every single trip down the floor? No, he's not. I think that's pretty much bore itself out. He's struggled to dribble the ball effectively. He doesn't really have a great handle, but at the same time, he can get downhill. He can get to the basket. He has good footwork once he gets inside the arc. We talk about his ability to hit deep shots from range. I think that a lot of his misses haven't been egregious. I think that he can definitely take better shots in terms of shot selection, but when he's actually gotten up a good look, I haven't seen too many egregious misses from him. He's had a lot, and shout out to Simon, Hawks Draft Nerd, has pointed this out to Tyler and I multiple times about he has a lot of misses where they just go in and out, right? Like I can't always say that, oh, he's a bad shooter when a lot of those shots, frankly, could have gone either way. And again, if the shooting percentages were better, we'd probably be having a different conversation. At least the general public would absolutely be having a different conversation. So
I'm not gonna lie, I've seen some egregious misses, and part of that is I dove
I said
into a
too
bunch.
many. Too many.
And that's why I'm still gonna go in because I have seen it. So that's one of the things that worried him, or worried me about him when I was writing the article and watching the film. There's like he chucks up a lot of air balls, and a lot of his misses don't hit the same part of the rim. Now a lot of the times he's creating off the bounce, so he's taking tough shots. But what scares me in that regard is that on a lot of these misses that aren't those pretty in and out misses that you're hoping for, it's like he just can't create the separation to cleanly get a look at the rim to get those consistent misses. So it's something that I was actually a little bit worried about because for a shooter like him who does have a jumper that's so aesthetically pleasing, who does look like he has touch that is so soft, especially when it goes in. Some of the misses, I was like, all right, he shouldn't be hitting the back side of the far side of the backboard, shooting from the left wing. Like that's a little worrisome. But that I think can be worked out a lot due to how an NBA team is going to use him, whether on ball versus off ball. And but I'm gonna go the opposite. I'm gonna zag there and say I've seen some misses that frighten me a little bit.
So do you think he should be? So what do you think his role ultimately is in the NBA court? Like, is he just like an off ball catch and shoot type of guy? Do you want him like dribbling the air out of the ball and creating some step back shot off the bounce, kind of like what he did in high school when we kind of said preseason / getting into the early part of the Ignite season when we last talked, how maybe he should take a few more of those shots because that was something he was comfortable doing, and whether he figures it out or not, at least get him some looks where he kind of like brings himself into the offense and becomes a little more comfortable doing some other things. So what do you think his role is going to be in the NBA?
I don't know what his role is going to be, but if he was somebody that I drafted and I was trying to get him to be the ultimate version of what I think his most likely outcome is, I don't think he's a combo guard at all. I wouldn't really be putting the ball in his hands a ton. I would hope that he has a usage that is pretty, I don't know, like 21, 22%, something like that, to where he's getting some on-ball reps to create one-on-one, because I do think he will be capable of hitting tough shots, but I would hope that that was mostly saved for end-of-shot clock situations, mismatches, rather than walk the ball up the court and fire. But ultimately, I think where he could be really hard to guard is moving off the ball. I think he is not a guy that you would classify as having great feel, but I do think when he's off the ball and he's running off pin downs or floppy action, stuff like that, he's really good at reading how the defender is guarding him and whether he should flare out or whether he should curl. So I would want to use him almost like primarily just causing chaos, running off actions, because I think that he is going to be able to use the fact that guys are chasing him to more easily create opportunities at the rim, collapsing defense, and I think it'll simplify the reads that he's shown he's capable of making, where you don't have to give him a high ball screen and hope that he can create those. I think that when the defense rotates, because he's just ran off a bunch of screens through, and now he curled it instead of flaring out this time, and guys are rotating, he can hit the weak side that way. I think that's ultimately his best role. I don't believe that an NBA team is going to draft him to do that, but if I was the NBA team doing that, that's what I would want him to do in the offense. I would not give him the Jalen Green, Anthony Edwards treatment.
It's kind of like, though, you're describing a player. Now, I think you've been the one to say this in our group as well. Like, you're describing a player in the realm of like Ben McLemore. Like that.
Yeah, I said I was joking. When I mentioned Ben McLemore 2.0, I was almost like joking a little.
You say almost, but every single thing you've just said, like not that we're calling him Ben McLemore 2.0, but like, that's the realm of player. That's the type of role that we're essentially laying out for Hardy. And if it becomes more than that, like that's great. But
I think
coming
it's
in.
more. I think if you're comparing him to a player, I would more compare him to hopefully a Buddy
Can he
Hield
be
type,
as good?
type
I
of
was
role.
literally just gonna say, can he be as good as Buddy Hield? Like,
Yeah,
okay,
that's the kind of role I would try to push him into. Buddy Hield had when he came into the NBA, he was way older and even older than everybody thought he was when he even came into the NBA. So he's got some years on him, and Jaden has the ability to develop. I think in that direction, but. I think there's a real shot that an NBA team drafts him, especially if they're drafting him in the lottery and they are like, this is going to be, our two guard of the future who's going to have a ton of on-ball reps. And I've felt less and less comfortable watching him because I know you've written about it. I just don't think he has the handle to
that dude cannot
consistently.
dribble the basketball. He
Yeah,
can't.
and look, he looked awesome doing it in that 31-point outing. Like it
He
was
did.
like
I just got done watching it before we hopped on the podcast.
it was night and day from the rest of the season. But I think the one thing I'm trying not to do with that 31-point game, because I was like, shit, do I have him a little bit too low on my board? But I'm trying not to be overreactive. Like if he starts stringing together a few games like this, and not, it doesn't have to be 30-point games. He could just start stringing a couple of efficient games. It doesn't even have to be over 20-point games. I just want to see some positive decision making and efficiency, and not just like barreling into defenders and stuff like that. But I I I just don't think he has the handle at this point to consistently break guys down. So I don't want him to try that at a high level. Sure, on a skit where he's attacking closeouts or attacking gaps, yeah, I don't think he's going to dribble the ball off his foot in that regard, and I think that he's strong enough to hold on to the ball, taking it to the rim, and he's not afraid to go into a guy's chest, which is good. But ultimately, I just think we miscalculated what he was coming into the year. And to be fair to him, there's also a chance that he is that guy, and COVID really affected his developmental arc, and he didn't get to play in high level ball in the FIBAs. He opted out of his senior year, and he was playing some whatever AAU games, and him being in this system, and in a couple of years from now, an NBA team actually is patient with him and pushes him in the right direction, and he's fucking awesome, and he's the guy. He's close to the guy we thought. That's also an outcome. But I think teams have to be careful with the direction that they try to take him in.
So Rucker, if we're talking about a player who we're comparing to Buddy Hield, right, and we're saying that that's probably like a really good outcome for him at this point, at least from what we've seen up until now, are you taking that player in the lottery?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still high on him.
Okay.
I'm a believer that they're putting him in uncomfortable positions. I know it's really annoying and hard when we're evaluating guys like this, but I just think the G League Ignite knew what he was coming in. He was this lethal shooter. They're trying to develop him. I think he's going to have a long developmental road that might be a lot longer than other guys. And we know he wasn't a strong ball handler coming into the year. I think they're trying to improve his handles because now he's going to get thrown to the big boys in the NBA. And if you're not developing it this year while he's playing, like, then he's just going to have no shot of building any confidence. So I think there's going to be some growing pains. I'm just still very high on him. I wouldn't be surprised if, yes, this is a guy that's going to take a couple of years to finally click when it comes to his whole game. I'm in complete agreement with you guys. I don't think he's going to be a guy that I want to have the ball in his hands for a bunch of actions. I think I'm right there with Corey. I think if you're running him off the ball with motion, screens, handoffs, like that's where he could be really dangerous. And I think that's where an NBA team will be like, this is what we want you to do. Like we saw you working on your handles. You took strides. If you're thrown into that position, you can survive. Like before you might not have, but you just got thrown to the wolves when it comes to having to run all these, pick and roll sets, make reads. I think the next team that drafts him will be like, we want this guy just coming in, running off everything, getting catch and shoot opportunities. Like that's where I'd see his next level of success coming. And this could be just perfectly played by the Ignite. They developed him all year. He had these growing pains, and all of a sudden things click at the next level. But he's going to be fascinating to watch. I hope that this recent stretch of promising games really starts to click the confidence, because he's had, unfortunately Corey saw the one stinker, but he had 18, 30, 29. Corey goes to see him go 0 for 11. Thanks, Corey. And then 31 points. So he's starting to come alive a little bit, and the numbers are showing.
In his defense, I was just going to say, in his defense, though, like, then not that I'm defending him against you guys, but like when we talk about putting him in these situations to like just catch and shoot or move off the ball and immediately like rise and fire. When he's able to get downhill and he only has to take like one dribble, he does have some pretty good footwork getting to the basket. Like he'll whip out some sidestep moves, and when he actually gets as far as the rim and he goes up against contact, he can finish through contact. Like that's another reason why I wanted to ask Corey about the body. Like he looks to have a pretty good build to him. Like he's strong. He's not. He's a guard who I would have a lot more confidence in finishing those types of shots than I would like a Buddy Hield, for example. So like there are ways in which maybe he can end up being like a Buddy Hield plus, like be even a little bit better than him in that regard.
Buddy Hield's a good enough player if you put him in the right situation. I mean,
Buddy Hield's a guy who got paid $20 plus million a year. So it's not about a scrub.
The dude's a sniper. He's just in any player who's playing in Sacramento is playing in a less than ideal situation, right? So it's not like Buddy Hield can't go to a contending team and have a major impact as like a microwave scorer in a playoff series. Like he can get hot and probably win you a series. My question is though, like when you're looking at Hardy and we're talking about the role that we potentially envision him and whatever spot of the draft, like what spot of the draft are you comfortable taking him in? And are you more comfortable if you're GM betting on Hardy? And the good thing is there's going to be a lot of NBA intel playing in the Ignite system, but like, are you going to argue for Hardy over Agbaji if you're a GM who's trying to probably keep their job? If you're trying to take the upside swing, what is the probability that Max Christie is a guy that is not going to have more success at the NBA level with his stroke, his size, and stuff that he probably hasn't been able to show as a freshman at Michigan State? Like, there are guys that are in that Hardy range where it's like, shit, it's not as easy as it should be. And the not as easy as it should be with a guy who was number 3 on the initial draft DAC rankings coming into the year, that's a tough conversation to have when you're looking at those kind of players as guys that, man, I'm not sure if I should take this guy over those other guys.
See, Corey, this is why you're a better podcast host than I am, because you set up.
Stop.
You set up a perfect segue, like into asking a question. I don't even think you mentioned a few good names, and we could probably come up with some others, but I don't even think we need to leave his own team to throw in 2 other guys who could possibly be drafted over him in Dyson Daniels and MarJon Beauchamp. Now, you and I both got a chance to see those 2 guys, but when we talk about size, length, athleticism on the wing, much better defensively, the both of them, than Hardy, and we start talking about fit in the NBA and what NBA teams are pining to draft, those 2 come into the conversation, not even leaving their own team. It's like, why wouldn't you want to draft one of those 2 guys over Jaden Hardy potentially? Like, Rucker, I know that you and I have had conversations about Beauchamp, and we've had a few conversations about Daniels. I'd be interested to get Corey's opinion on Daniels as well. But like, even just talking about Beauchamp, like, which one would you rather draft between the 2, Beauchamp or Hardy?
I'm still leaning Hardy, and I love Beauchamp. But I'm still leaning Hardy just because I think the upside is still there. I think that's still a home run potentially waiting to happen. It's just been a little bit more of like a rude awakening for us because we wanted him to just set the G League on fire like Scoot Henderson is. But it just might be a longer path. And I really like the other 2 that we're going to talk about, but
talk to me about Beauchamp, because I know that he's been one. I mean, I think he's risen up all of our boards, but I know that you've really been saying some good things about him lately. So talk to me about Beauchamp. What do you like about him?
I think he's a bull in a there you go. A bull in a jeweler store. I think he just wrecks stuff.
Bull in a China stock. There
No,
you go.
I
That's
like
the
mine.
phrase.
Thank you, but I prefer it my way. No, I was quoting a movie there. Thank you for fixing it. I just really like Beauchamp. I think he plays so damn hard that he just tries to find anything he can do to help on the court. Like he's positions himself for like erratic shots to get the offensive rebound and put a tip in. He's showing that he's got some potential to space the floor and become a more consistent shooter, hopefully. He's shown some flashes off the dribble. He's shown some defensive versatility. The only thing that's annoying is his age, but I think there's still so much basketball that's waiting to come to rise to the surface. Like every time I watch him, I find another thing that I love about him. And I just think I'm a sucker for the guys that play their ass off. And he plays so damn hard on both sides of the ball. And I think he's buzzing. I think this is the guy that's climbing. And I think NBA teams are really starting to fall in love with them. So I think Beauchamp's a guy that's going to be a quick riser. And he's one of those guys each time you watch, you're trying to creep him up your boards because this is a guy NBA teams want. He's going to come in and just play his ass off and try to do anything he can to help his team in a better way.
He definitely especially seeing him up close, he definitely looks like he plays like he's forever grateful for this opportunity that he's gotten to play with the Ignite team. You can just look at him and you can just tell like we know some of his backstory with the JUCO stuff, but like you can tell this dude's been through some shit and he's fought through it and he has fought tooth and nail to get to where he is today. And he's gotten to the point where he's put in the work and he is climbing up draft boards rapidly. Shout out to ESPN with Gavoni and Schmitz, but like they had him ranked up pretty highly on one of their most recent boards. I think they had him as high as 15, and there's some buzz that he could probably climb even higher into the lottery. And quite frankly, I might be there. Tyler, you talked about the jump shot was a big question mark for him, but his last like 3 or 4 games, you flip on the film, he is stepping into these 1-2 dribble pull-ups like they're nothing for him. And he's hitting open spot up threes. He was doing that in bunches when I saw him in Delaware. He ended that game with 25 points. He is putting the ball in the basket. We already knew how good of a defender he was. He's arguably, in my opinion, I think he's the best transition wing player in the class. There, you guys might have an argument for that, but I think he's the best one. So, like, when you start to put these things together at his 6'6" size with length, like, what NBA team doesn't want MarJon Beauchamp? And right. I think that should speak to his draft stock enough. Like, why should he not be in the lottery at this point? Corey, what were some of your impressions and takeaways from seeing him?
I mean, he gave me everything I wanted to see. You know, like I pulled up, you know, the first thing I wrote about him after his first game, and I wrote the most impressive Ignite prospect on the floor was Washington native MarJon Beauchamp, and he's another Seattle guy, and I will bet on, you know, Seattle, Washington.
Oh, I did not know. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Woo, that might moved up 2 spots just on its own. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So he's been a guy, and I was super excited to watch him before the Ignite season because out of all the Ignite guys that I did background work on before, watching his tape, I was like, oh, yeah, I like this. He's long, he's athletic, he can get his shot off. Like, oh yeah, let's go. And after watching him the first time, I was like, all right, I'm in. Like, this dude, he just looks like modern NBA, like in the form of a wing. And I think that he's been the best player. He's the highest Ignite prospect on my board. I think he's been phenomenal, like you said, in transition. He finishes everything. It's the footwork, the feel in that area. And I'm an eye test guy when it comes to the shot. Like, I don't care if he's shooting, you know, the 27%, 28% or whatever. Like,
it looks good.
It's clean when it comes off his hand. There's nothing functionally wrong with the form. And at that point, it just becomes reps. And, you know, he's shooting it at NBA distance, which the college guys aren't. So, you know, maybe he shoots it a little bit better. I love how weird his developmental arc is. Like, yeah, he might be almost 21 years old, but he's not coming from the same developmental background as a lot of these other guys. He had a weird path. And to me, like, when you have a weird path, I think you can almost not ignore age entirely, but like you can look at it in a way that it's not the same necessarily as somebody who might also be the same age as him. Like you look at Chris Duarte, who was 24 or whatever, he also had a weird path. And I think, just because he was older doesn't mean that there wasn't room for his game to grow, because he didn't get those same growth opportunities as some of the other prospects who grew up in a more normal system. I think MarJon's kind of in that same boat, and he's going from playing at the a lower level to all the way to this pro level, and he has not looked out of place at all. And now that he's doing some more stuff off the bounce that he feels comfortable with, from the minute the first game I watched him, I'm like, this dude is Josh Howard, and I can't get that out of my mind. And Josh Howard would have fit perfectly into the modern NBA now as a switchable, long, rangy, do a little bit of everything wing. I don't think Beauchamp's going to be an all-star in the league, but I think that he's a guy who literally every team could be like, I can find a roster spot for this guy. I could find minutes for this guy. And I'm really excited to see how his game grows, because, like you said, this kid wants it, and he plays like it. He plays so hard. I think he's got all the intangibles I look for, all the skills I'm looking for. And in a draft like this, where it just gets murky in that late lottery range, if he goes lottery, I'm not going to be shocked. I think right now he's right outside of that for me, but there's no doubt that he could play his way into that.
His body language too, like when you watch him, especially up close, like he'll get frustrated when he doesn't always do the right thing or make the right play, but it's a visible frustration, but it's not like out of place. He doesn't get like over emotional or angry, something that causes him to continue to mess up throughout the game. He kind of like checks himself, but he's measured. And I love that type of mature approach in a prospect's game. I think that exemplifies leadership. And yeah, I really don't have too many negatives to say about Beauchamp. Like, obviously, he's not going to be somebody who is initiating offense or like running pick and rolls all the time. But at the same time, like, are you really going to be asking him to do those things anyway? Like, we're talking about somebody who's going to sprint to the corner, be able to cut to the basket, which he is a really good cutter. He recognizes those situations. He's going to play out in transition, and he's going to defend one-on-one. But he's also somebody who is really good at recognizing situations to come up and double and trap, and he generally is able to poke the ball out, force a turnover, which is great because of how good he is in transition. Chances are he's getting the ball back and he's going to hammer home a dunk, or he's going to glide around somebody one-on-one. He's still going to finish around the basket or finish the end one anyway. So he just has a package to me that screams like third or fourth option in virtually any NBA lineup that we want to throw him into. And I think that player, especially in a draft class where we have so many unknowns, is incredibly valuable. Now, if you would poll the majority of evaluators, I think they would probably still lean towards taking Dyson Daniels before Beauchamp, and we can agree or disagree on that. I think I would. It's really tough because when you see Daniels up close, I think he's. I know Sam Vecini and Matt Penny have reported this, and Penny just saw him up close as well. Like, they've reported he's bigger than 6'6". Like, I would agree with that. I think he's that. I think he's 6'7".
I don't know.
What do you think he is, Corey?
I think he's closer to 6'4" than 6'7".
6'4". 6'4".
Maybe 6'5". He's definitely 6'7" is crazy to me. 6'7" is crazy.
Know. I will acknowledge maybe the long neck gives him like an extra inch. I'll acknowledge that.
His hair, his 6'7" seems that's like LaMelo Ball territory. I
don't know. It'll be interesting to see what he measures. Actually, that dude is big. That dude's big and he's long. And seeing him up close and personal, we knew about the defense coming in. He's arguably the best perimeter defender in the class. 1 through 3, it doesn't matter. Generally, you're not getting by that dude. He is a disruptive defender like Beauchamp as well. He can absolutely pick your pocket, force the steal. I'm not as excited about him putting the ball in the basket offensively. He can finish at the rim in one-on-one situations. He can also be an effective force in transition, but we know the jump shot's been inconsistent for him. I talked about him at length with Chuck at chucking darts, and Chuck really thinks it's more of a confidence thing and a repetition thing. Like, he just needs to get more comfortable taking those shots when they're given to him, instead of trying to read the court, survey what's going on, and maybe try to make a pass elsewhere. Because he is a very selfless player, and he does have good court vision. He has good feel for the game. He's younger than Beauchamp, which is why I think gun to a lot of evaluators' heads, I think they'd probably lean his direction. But I don't know, Corey. I think you kind of helped talk me into that as well. That I think Beauchamp is probably the guy who I would rather have on my team than Dyson Daniels, and I'm still a Dyson Daniels fan. Like I think the both of them. Matter of fact, if we're just going through it, I think Hardy, Beauchamp, and Daniels are all lottery prospects in this draft. Which it's a little crazy to say because we had guys like Stephen Gillespie asking us early on, like, how many Duke guys do you think are going to go in the first round of this draft? And like, I think the better question is how many Ignite guys are going to go in the first round of this draft. Rucker, I don't know where you're at on Daniels, if you have any strong opinions about him. Do you think that he's a lottery prospect, or would you have him maybe a run or two below on your board?
Yeah, he's a lottery to me. I think the feel with him stands out to me more than anything. Just the feel for the game. He really shows some nice flashes. The height will be interesting. It's fascinating to hear you guys have two different visions with that, because I was like, well, if he's closer to 6'7", and Corey's saying closer to 6'4", like, we're going to have to make some sort of bet when the official combine measurements come out betwing you two. But I really
we see each other often enough. We can make a bet.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. I really like Daniels. Coming around on him late, the more I've watched him, the more I've just been impressed with some of like the footwork he has, kind of the patience he has to let, defenses create a window for him to attack. He's also shown some flashes where you could post him up and he kind of does some great footwork in the post where it's getting guys to sell for his fakes. So I think he's going to be a lottery guy. I'm not saying I'm thinking he's top 10. I do think someone in that 10 to 14 range is going to be very intrigued with a potential 6'5", 6'6" guard that's young, that shows that, they have an all-around game potentially. And, going back to Beauchamp, like, I think Beauchamp could crash the party. I really do think he could get up into the lottery. I think that.
Which one would you rather have? Which one of the two would you rather draft? Just your personal opinion.
It depends on my job. I'm really being serious. Like, am I a team that, like, I need to get an extension? I'd take Beauchamp. Am I a team that I've got some time to develop a potential really good piece? Like, I would take Daniels. I just think Beauchamp, like, I wanted to say this earlier and I just need to say it. Beauchamp has taken so much strides offensively that I'm just so giddy about it. Like, beginning of the year, he had a play, I think it was coming off a handoff. He took a pull-up jumper and, like, it looked like he missed it by 5 feet and he banked it in. But, like, the moment he released, he sprinted after it to get the rebound. Like, I know how that feeling is because I can't shoot for shit. And now he's like dribble, pull up in rhythm in transition from deep. And it's just like, you could see the work's being put in, the confidence is paying off. That's what gets me excited about him. And Daniels is also just showing, like, he's taken strides when it comes to the feel. His playmaking's been fascinating to me. I think he knows how to make defenses collapse and then dump off or find guys. So I think they're both fascinating. I just think Beauchamp gives me, like, poor man's Sean Marion vibes. And I love him. So, yeah, if I needed to get an extension, I would probably be drafting Beauchamp.
What makes this conversation fascinating, Corey, before I kick it over to you for more of your thoughts about Daniels, is Beauchamp is creeping upwards, at least from an offensive production standpoint, at the right time. And Daniels, the last few games, he really did not stand out to me in the game against Capital City Go-Go's, and he certainly didn't stand out to me from a production standpoint in Delaware. I'm curious some of your thoughts about his offensive repertoire after seeing him up close overall, because that is a fascinating point to bring up. Like, Beauchamp has absolutely gotten better as the season has gone on, and Daniels has been in a role where he definitely had more responsibility on his plate than I think even he could have necessarily envisioned. And now he's kind of like evened out to potentially trending a little bit downwards now that Scoot Henderson's been on the team and they've been able to give him the ball a lot more as the point guard running the show. And I don't know. What do you think about Daniels?
I think if you're a team and you're looking at Daniels, the guy that you want him to kind of become is like Lonzo Ball, where not a high usage playmaker in the half court, but good enough feel to make plays when he's tasked to, when you're attacking gaps off a skip. Maybe you run, some stuff off a handoff or just he doesn't put enough pressure on the rim that I feel comfortable giving the ball to him and letting him create as a primary guy in the NBA. But he does have the size, whether he's 6'5" or 6'7", to guard multiple spots. He does have enough of a handle, even if it's not breakdown level handle,
Yep.
to, dribble the ball and run a pick and roll. I think he's got really good vision and feel. The question with him will become, when teams sag off and go under on ball screens, are you going to be able to make them pay? And if he proves that he could do that, then his value goes up exponentially, because now you got a really intelligent player that defends, can knock down shots, dribble, pass, shoot, that whole thing. That's what NBA teams want. You want a guy who's versatile enough to play on or off the ball, fit in with your potential superstar, play off of that guy, and not give up anything on the other end. And I think that he has that potential. I don't think he's going to ever really impress you in a way that makes you walk away going, whoa, Dyson Daniels just left an impression on me in that game like nobody else, because that's not his game. It's very slow and methodical, and then he'll do something. It's not like he's a bad athlete or anything. He's good athletically, but it's very just low key, his game. And that's why I kind of say that Lonzo Ball's the goal, because it's a lot of the same type of stuff. I think Lonzo is a much higher level prospect. Obviously, I think he's going to be a higher level impact player. But I think if you can get a poor man Lonzo out of that spot, because you look at Lonzo and the role he's playing, he's not really the point guard in the sense that he initiates offense, right? DeRozan initiates most of the offense for the Bulls. Lonzo kind of spots up and plays off ball and then makes things happen when he can. And where you really see him flourish is transition. I think Daniels, when he has the ball in his hands, getting a board and going coast to coast and making plays in transition where there's more space, I think that's where you'll see him thrive as well. So I like him as a prospect. I'm not quite as high. I don't have him as a lottery guy. I see the argument for it, where you might just feel safer taking him in a certain spot than some of the other guys who have downsides. But for me, I do think there's enough intrigue with some guys around the late lottery, around the 15 to 20 range, where Daniels would really have to wow me in workouts where I see a much more dynamic player for me to really go all in the way some other guys have, because we just mentioned, he doesn't have that thing that makes you go, fuck, Dyson Daniels is awesome, and I wanna see it, but I think he's a guy that is a safe bet, but you're just not gonna get that high, any real kind of upside outside of just a strong rotational player.
I think he does definitely have to get better shooting from the corners. If I was telling Dyson Daniels, the first thing that I would want him to get better at as he goes to the next level would be become a much better shooter from the corners, to the point where when you're just spacing the floor and you're not necessarily involved in a ball screen action, make sure that you are a legitimate threat, because otherwise, if you're just spacing the floor for absolutely no reason and you're not knocking down those shots when you get them, how much value are you necessarily providing on the offensive end of the floor if you're not actively cutting like a Beauchamp, for example? That's what I would tell him to definitely look to improve on first and foremost. But let's talk about the last guy who we'd be evaluating for this draft cycle for the G League Unite. So many people have tweeted positive things about Scoot Henderson, and I literally did the same thing when I saw him. I told Penny after I did the podcast with him a month ago that I was going to try to wait until I saw Scoot to tweet about him, because what bad really is there to say about that guy? He is so impressive for a 17-year-old. Good gracious. But Michael Foster Jr. is the last guy that we can talk about. And I know Rucker and I might be cooking up a little something for No Ceilings later in the week, spoiler alert, on him. But I asked Corey about him because he was going to see him in person. And Foster's become a really, really intriguing player for me, to where at the beginning of the year, I didn't know if he was a top 45 guy, to now it's gotten to the point where I'm having a really hard time keeping him out of the first round. And I'm curious, Corey, to get your thoughts about him as a whole. I know that the biggest thing to me that stands out is that he is not good defensively. I think part of the reason is that Ignite's kind of had him playing in this center position. And if we want to talk about heights and measurements, like Foster's definitely not bigger than 6'8". I think his wingspan, Rucker and I were looking this up earlier. Basketball News has his wingspan at 6'11". So he's definitely undersized to be playing the five. And I just don't think his instincts and his awareness overall as kind of like that backline defender are there. So I think that Ignite's already doing him a disservice on the defensive end. But even so, like, he just lets up a lot of points, man. Like you can challenge him, you can go into him, and you can score on him. In that Capital City game, the game previous to the Delaware game, Greg Monroe was playing a lot of time for Capital City. And like, you want to talk about a center who just has everything in the bag because he's just been around doing it for so long. Like, he gave Michael Foster the business, possession after possession after possession. So I really worry about finding a role for him defensively. But offensively, I come away like, what really can't he do offensively on the basketball court? He may not be great at everything, but he's shown me a little bit of almost everything that you'd probably ask him to do. Being a roll man, being a guy who can have pick and pop, who can catch, turn, face, knock down a jump shot around the elbow. He can post up. He can finish in transition. He runs the floor really hard. Like, he does a little bit of everything offensively to the point where I'm like, man, this guy could really fill it up on an NBA floor. And he really could average a double-double. He could be one of those guys that puts up a lot of numbers. But if he's giving up so much on the defensive end, like, that's where you start asking yourself, like, well, if he becomes a wash, like, how good of a player actually is he? But I'm curious to get some of your thoughts on him, Corey.
I don't know what happened when you went to see him and what happened when I went to see him, but I was looking at him and I'm like, this dude looks fucking huge. Like, to me, I was like, if this dude is 6'8", there's no way Dyson Daniels is anywhere close. I thought he looked gigantic. And I thought he looked like he had a pretty decent wingspan too. So we must have been.
All right, well, one of us was incredibly intoxicated when we went to go to the game.
Dude, I don't know. And the other thing, when I saw him, he was actually pretty good defensively. You know, he had I don't know, I have the stats in front of me, but he did a really good job protecting the rim, being a deterrent, getting vertical. I think he's got fairly quick hands, and the dude's chest was absolutely massive, so he could definitely take the physicality of like banging down low. Now he was really intrigued. I was really impressed. I was probably more impressed by him than anybody else I'd seen because I was anticipating that Beauchamp was going to have a good game.
Yeah.
Daniels played exactly the way I expected him to play, which is just like you walk away going, okay, I saw that. And, you know, Hardy, we've covered how he shot in the game. But Foster was like a pleasant surprise where I was like, all right, this is the kind of performance I want to see. Like, he's making his presence felt on both ends. He's running hard to the rim in transition. He's protecting the rim. He's doing a lot of the little things that I want to see. He's even showed a little bit of the ability to pass it. He's not always a great decision maker, but he is showing flashes of being able to make reads and pass, and which is a good sign, I think. So I walked away definitely thinking that he's a guy that is draftable. If a team took him in the first round, if they had good intel on him based on his time with the Ignite program, I would not blink an eye because there's definitely something there. He's definitely raw. He's definitely not going to be ready to contribute in a meaningful way early on. But if you are a believer in your program and your G League team and how you can develop raw talent, I think he's a guy that's definitely worth taking a chance on. And, you know, when we're doing these boards and giving guys grades, like, you know, we're doing it a lot of times with no context of what a team is looking for and what their thought process is, how they plan on building out. So while, you know, maybe I have him more in the 40 range, something like that, if he was taken at pick 28 by a team, I wouldn't think that that's unreasonable by any stretch.
So how would you approach? So if you thought that he showed you some good things defensively, like you're a coach, like how would you utilize him defensively? Do you think he's that kind of like backline protector type of dude? Like, would you kind of try to have him play on the other team's like worst guy, maybe try to have him like help inside as much as possible? Like, how would you utilize him defensively?
I mean, I think he's an NBA center. I don't want him chasing around, Pascal Siakam or,
Sure.
one of these 6'9" wing creators, right? I'm not asking him to check Jason Tatum by any stretch. I would have him. I think that you would want him to play like drop and because I think he's mobile enough to kind of play cat and mouse and athletic enough to, get to the ball handler and recover back to the big. I think that's kind of the scheme that I would want to see him in the most. I think that occasionally to switch things up, I do think he's athletic enough that you could send, a blitz at a ball handler with him and hope that he can get back and recover. But I think early on you don't want to do too many overcomplicated things
Sure.
with him. You don't want to throw that too much that way. Let him be athletic. Let him be a disruptor, a playmaker in that sense, where he is going to be able to just meet you at the rim, jump up, and go vertical and make your life hard. Because like I said, I think he's got the body to absorb contact. Like, I was like, Jesus, like how many?
Oh, he's strong. Yeah, I didn't say that he wasn't like built really well.
Right, but
Yeah.
I was like, this dude has been bench pressing all week for this. Like, his chest is massive. So I think that he's going to have the physicality won't necessarily be a problem, and I think he's going to be able to handle bigger centers. No, he's not going to guard Embiid or Jokic. Nobody is, but is he going to be able to bang with Daniel Gafford? Yeah, I think he's going to be able to bang with Daniel Gafford and guys like that. So that's kind of my initial take on how I'd use him, and then you see what you got in limited minutes. He's not going to be a high minutes guy. He's, hopefully just a guy who you could be like, hey, play your butt off on that end, protect the rim, try to get your hands in the passing lanes, and try to make some stuff happen.
Rucker, you would kind of put in the group, and you tagged me in a message. And you're like, I'm starting to come around on Michael Foster. So what are some of the things now that you've had a little bit of time to watch some film on him? What are some things that have stood out to you about him?
This is just the guy that if I was wanting a big to develop at the end of the first and I snuck back up there and got Michael Foster, I would be so pumped. Like, this is the guy. I would just draft him. I'd say you're going to spend another another year in the G League. I just really am intrigued with, offensively, the outside shot looks strong. There's just some good flashes of footwork all over the place. He's humongous. Like, he's just a force. He just turned 19. He looks lengthy. So when I was looking up his wingspan, I was a little shocked. I was like, he looks bigger than that. Like, and he looks bigger than 6'8". So I was just like, okay, like I'm intrigued. He runs the floor like hard. Like, I just kept checking boxes. And it's weird because defensively, like I was watching him on defense, like protecting the rim. He gets up a little bit quicker than you think. Like, there's some pop off the floor.
He's a pretty intriguing 2-foot leaper. Like, that man will all of a sudden just like explode up out of nowhere, especially like skying for rebounds on the defensive end.
And I saw someone threw a floater up at him, and he, like, from a flat foot, just at the very top, blocked it. And I was like, that was some pop. Like, you had to get up for that. So
yeah,
there's intriguing. I'm a nerd, so I just started doing, and thanks for the G League for stopping to keep track of all your game log stats. That's really helpful for all of us. So first 15 games, he was averaging 14, 8.6, and 1.7 blocks a game while shooting 46% from the field. His last 5 games, he's at 18.2 points, 8.8 rebounds, 2.4 blocks, 58%. So, like, Nathan, you said it to me earlier in the year. You're like, Foster's starting to kind of come alive. And today, finally, I dove into his film and I was like, okay, like, this would be a guy that I would be pumped to take a swing at the end of the first, where it's like, I'm the same way as Corey. I kind of have him in that, early 40s, maybe even higher range right now. I'm trying to kind of figure out where I want to put him. It would not surprise me if someone was a believer, if he had a good pre-draft workout where he's shooting the crap out of the ball and still very young. Like I said, just turned 19. Like, it would not shock me if he ends up as a end of the first round, like strong developmental staff. Someone like Toronto, they jump back in, they stash him, their staff gets to work with him for an entire year, and then you just reap the benefits. Like, I think there's some intriguing tools there. I definitely think that's one of the guys that deserves a little bit more attention from the G League team, although there's some really good prospects. I think Michael Foster's starting to heat up at the right time.
And by the way, I don't want anybody to necessarily be overly concerned about some of the shooting percentages they might see when they look up for Foster. Like, yeah, he's only shooting 48.7% from the field as a big, but he's also taking a lot of face-up jumpers.
Right.
So that factors into it as well. He's not doing as much at the basket as we probably like him to. They don't usually post him up a ton. He's generally finishing off lobs or in transition. But yeah, he has really stood out to me. I mean, I saw him in warmups, like he was practicing like sizing somebody up with a few dribble moves and then like stepping back and knocking down jumpers, and some of them looked really, really smooth. And I'm like, Jesus, if he has this in his bag, like if this is something he can eventually develop, like, yeah, why are we not talking about this guy like at the back end of the first? And I Corey made a good point that like whether you have him like the 28 to 30 or whether you have him like in the low 40s, like that's a 25 to like 45 is about as wide of a range I think in this draft as any. So we're talking about splitting hairs. I think even with that wide, like a 20 pick range, where we're really splitting hairs with some of these guys. But yeah, he's somebody who's stood out to me, and I may have him ranked in the first round of my big board the next time we do an update. We'll see where he is on the No Ceilings composite board the next time we do it. That'll be really fun to see. But I think we've had a really good conversation about these guys. Corey, I apologize. I was a terrible host because I did not plug your Jaden Hardy piece at the beginning of this podcast, which you referenced it. But by the way, that was phenomenal. Everything you write for us is incredibly creative. Like I actually get a little jealous when I read some of your stuff. Like, damn, I'm not this creative with my writing. I wish I could be.
I appreciate that, man. You know, look, one of the things we're trying to do with No Ceilings is bring you fun content that isn't the same boring drivel that you get throughout the internet, which some of the boring drivel is really good reads and you can learn a lot from it. But we want to, you know, take a spin, and that's so I think one of the cool things about having such a great team is that it pushes me to be creative and do something different, because everybody's just sending out heat every morning to people's inboxes. So I'm trying to do my part to keep that train rolling and the, you know, the fire coming out of the keyboard.
Plug yourself, Corey. Plug your handle, your podcast. Plug everything that you're doing for us.
Yeah, at Corey Tulaba on Twitter. You'll find all the links there. But NBA Draft Dude on YouTube, got a film sesh on Paolo Banchero, hopefully coming out next week. I've been saying that for the last like 3 weeks on my podcast, which is the Draft Act NBA Draft Podcast. And when this podcast is out, I'll have another piece that already went live on No Ceilings, my Tuesday column, called "What Would Masai Do?" Little hint coming out about building drafting for identity. So I'm excited for that piece to come out, and yeah, make sure you subscribe to that No Ceilings Substack, boys and girls.
Rucker, do what you do every single week on my podcast and plug No Ceilings.
NoCeilings.substack.com, absolutely free. I don't understand why you haven't subscribed to it. Do it, or Nathan's gonna hunt you down. No, I'm kidding. It's been fantastic. Awesome team of writers that are only getting better and making me have to really, really, really try to get better at my writing because they're so talented. So please follow us there. Follow us at No Ceilings NBA on social media, and our YouTube channel is starting to really kick ass. So that's No Ceilings TV. So please follow us everywhere. And of course, follow Nathan at Draft Deeper. What are you doing?
Follow me on Twitter at Draft Deeper. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. And yeah, go subscribe to that Substack. I just put out a column where, speaking of boring and drab, I put out a 5,700 word monster on the rookie class. We have not written about the rookies quite yet on our Substack. I'm sure more of us will contribute in that space soon, but I figured why not give these guys their due, because they've been absolutely phenomenal this year. The 2021 draft may go down as the deepest draft class in NBA history. We'll see if that actually bears out, but there have been some really, really impressive players. I think the fact that I took the time to write about like 16 guys, that says something about that draft class. Because I can't picture myself writing as many words about that many guys about this class the same time next year as I did that class. But that being said, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Again, noceilings.substack.com. Come along for the ride. We're doing incredibly fun things every single day, Monday through Friday, and we'll keep the draft content rolling. So thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your week.